Welcome to the second module on Descartes. We're today going to be moving on from about the third paragraph down on page 13. Just quickly to recap our last module. So Descartes going through the process of kind of attacking / demolishing the foundations on which all his beliefs lie, and he put forward in the last module these two basic principles on which his beliefs rest: his senses, and reason. And in the last module, he successfully demolished the senses. And this quote down the bottom of the slide here kind of sums that up. Suppose then that I am dreaming, perhaps indeed I do not even have hands or a body at all. So he's kind of questioning what senses can really tell us. And he made quite a few attacks kind of on the senses in that reading.
Okay, so as we'll see, he now kind of goes on to question whether he can trust reason, which was the second basic principle. So we'll come back to that, but he starts off by, he's actually drawing an analogy here. An analogy is basically like a comparison. So he's drawing a comparison between having a dream and a painter painting a picture. So him having a dream is kind of like a painter creating an artwork, right?
Yep.
In a way. So he's trying to prove a point. He's saying, well, surely... So, like, if you imagine a painter doing a painting, they might create a picture of something that doesn't actually exist, right? Like, for example, this thing called a satyr. He refers to sirens and satyrs on page 13. A satyr is this made-up creature which is kind of half human, half horse, and sometimes it also has goat horns. So as you can see in this picture, it's not a real thing, right? So the painter has created something that doesn't exist. Just like if Descartes was having a dream and his whole life was a dream, maybe in his mind he's creating stuff that doesn't exist, like having a body.
Yeah.
But Descartes saying, but surely even if I'm making up everything, surely elements of what I'm making up actually do exist. Yeah. So for example, the painter who's painted this picture, they've drawn a picture of a satyr that doesn't exist, but they've used individual elements that do exist. For example, a head. You know, even if this actual creature is not real, heads exist, or like goat horns exist, or the body of a horse, or whatever.
Yeah.
So surely we can trust that, like, even if we're imagining everything, maybe our imaginations are based on something that is actually real. But some people might say to Descartes, well, when painters do paintings, they don't necessarily paint stuff that exists at all. Like, they might make something up that's completely new, such that nothing remotely similar has ever been seen before. Like in this painting that I found, that's not a real thing at all. That's just a made-up thing. So couldn't that be true? Like, if we were having a dream, everything we're dreaming could be completely fictitious. It could be completely made up.
Yeah.
But then Descartes says, yeah, but even if that's the case, surely something so basic as the colours in the dream must actually be real. Like, if I have a dream about crazy made-up things, and it's all in yellow, surely I can say yellow is something that really exists.
Yep. So here, Descartes is going even further by saying that if everything in our dream that we're seeing and hearing is imaginary, there are certain universal things that are always going to be present and true and real. For example, every time we dream, there's going to be shapes like a square, and that's always going to have four sides. Yeah. Or every time that we encounter numbers, they're going to have a particular meaning, and so 1 + 1 is going to equal 2. And in all our dreams and in everything we're encountering, there's always going to be the passing of time. So there's these certain fundamental things that is just constantly there, even if we're imagining everything else.
Even if everything is made up, we don't have a body, nothing's real. Surely there must be these things that are real. Like, how can there possibly be a world where 1 plus 1 does not equal 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the things that Descartes' talking about here, shapes, numbers, time, all that kind of stuff, they link to reason rather than the senses. So he started talking about reason. Can we trust reason?
Yeah.
Now, do you remember this whole thing, empirical propositions and rational propositions?
Yeah.
Cool. So empirical propositions are things that we learn through the senses. What does Descartes think about empirical propositions?
That they're all false.
Well, we can't trust any of them.
Yeah.
But then he's kind of asking himself, are there some rational propositions which we could trust? And rational propositions are the ones that we get purely from thinking about them.
Yeah.
So, for example, he's trying to suggest maybe we can trust things like 1 plus 1 equals 2, or a square has 4 sides, because they just have to be true.
Great. So here he's having a bit more of that kind of dialogue in his mind going on, and he's going to do a bit of a back and forth about whether he can or can't trust reason. So he's saying here that while it might be reasonable for you to think that physics or astronomy or medicine are doubtful, because all of those are relying on the physical and your senses. So we know that a certain skin condition causes something or looks like something because of our senses.
So medicine is a good example to take here.
Yeah.
Medicine is, sorry to interrupt, medicine is a science where we learn about it through our senses, because if I say, oh, Tim, you're a bit sick, I'm going to give you this medicine. Oh, now you've gotten better. I learnt that by observing you and seeing you get better. So, Descartes saying, well, maybe those things, medicine, physics, astronomy, we can't trust them.
Exactly.
There might be some other things like arithmetic. What's arithmetic?
So arithmetic is maths.
Yeah, like adding, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. That you're using reason for.
Yeah.
And while they might be simple and general, they contain certainty in that, because we're able to think and use our minds. Yeah. And they always have to equal something. So this last quote's really good. So for whether I am awake or asleep, 2 and 3 added together are 5, and a square has no more than 4 sides.
So even if everything's a dream, surely we can trust arithmetic, like adding up. Surely we can trust geometry, which is the study of shapes. Yeah. Surely these things provide us indubitable truth.
Yeah, and so for this reason, he believes that you can trust reason.
But then he comes back at himself and says, well, he goes back to this idea of God tricking him. Like, how does he really know that God hasn't just tricked him about maths and about shapes? So he says, how do I know that God has not brought it about that I too go wrong every time I add 2 and 3 or count the sides of a square? So when Descartes is sitting down and counting how many sides a square has, he might feel like he's counting 4, but God might actually be tricking him into adding an extra side or something like that. Yeah. So how does he really know that rational propositions like a square has 4 sides are indubitably true?
Yeah, so and that's why he's saying that you cannot trust reason, but then he again comes back at himself in his own head about why he should trust reason. This seems a bit weak in my opinion, but he's basically saying that God would never deceive you in such a way because he is supremely good. So therefore 2 plus 2 is always going to equal 4. Yeah. You're not being tricked, and therefore you can trust reason.
But then, of course, Descartes, being the doubter that he is, he comes back again and says, well, actually, no, I can't trust reason because God has actually deceived me before. Like, if God exists, I have been tricked about certain things. Like, my senses have tricked me. Sometimes I've believed something that has turned out to be false. So, God's tricked me before. Why couldn't he trick me again?
Yeah.
So really, I shouldn't be trusting anything, even those basic things, like 2 plus 2 equals 4. Yeah. So now Descartes has effectively demolished the two fundamental principles on which all his beliefs rest. Do you remember what they were?
The senses and reason.
Yep, and he's shown why we should not trust either of those.
Yep.
So he says, and this is on page 15, I'm finally compelled to admit that there is not one of my former beliefs about which a doubt may not properly be raised. So in other words, every single thing that I previously believed, I can doubt.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that I know for sure. And then he this is worth reading yourselves, as I'm sure you're doing for everything that we're talking about. He kind of rambles on a bit about how difficult it is to actually convince himself that everything is false.
Okay.
So, of course, I can sympathise with him. Of course, you're going to kind of slip back into thinking, oh, yeah, I have a body.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in this chair. But Descartes is so committed to this that he wants to actually convince himself that even those most basic things are false.
Yeah.
So he says he must make an effort to remember that he must doubt everything.
Yeah.
And therefore he convinces himself that not God, but rather some malicious demon has employed all his energies in order to deceive me. So that's just his kind of imagining this demon just to make it easier for himself to not believe in anything. And he says it towards the end, I shall stubbornly and firmly persist in this meditation. He's really committed to not believing anything.
Yeah.
And going into this radical doubt. And so this is the end of the first meditation. The whole point of this radical doubt is so that he can say that he doesn't believe anything and then build up some things that he can believe in the second meditation. So that's what we'll pick up with when we return.
Very cool.